Hello and welcome to Who Watches the World Cup, the only podcast on the internet that I know of, but I don't know much, where international football is compared with international politics to predict the winners, to see how we think things are going to play out on the field. I'm joined, as always, by David Bryan. Dave, we just recorded the controversy episode. I'm pretty tired. How are you feeling?
Emotionally exhausted, but I hope this will be a nice uplifting,
Yeah. I'm glad you feel that way because I bought you a present to help you try to see it through.
Did you?
Yes, we stopped recording for 5 minutes so that you could go to the toilet. And in the meantime, I got you some coffee and I went downstairs and I brought you some Terry's chocolate orange.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Now, it's the middle of June and Terry's chocolate orange is a British chocolate reserved almost entirely for Christmas. And so I'm hoping that this Terry's chocolate orange that we've got here, as well as stick to the back of your throat and stop you from projecting, in a way that's useful on a podcast.
Okay.
I'm hoping that it's going to, the sugar and the dopamine that it will help us get through. So enjoy some of that with your coffee.
Thank you very much. I will.
Yeah.
I do like a chocolate orange. I'm not a huge chocky fan, but I will have a chocky orange.
That's good. And it looks like a football. So
Shall we see how many keep-ups we can do?
with the Terry's chocolate orange. Yeah. All right. Let's give it a go. My total will be 0. So I think
you won't even miss the first kick.
I think I'll drop it and go whoa, and that'll be it. So we're here to finish what we started, Dave. We're here to talk about Group E. Don't let me get carried away with myself this time. Let's get straight into some football. Who have we got in Group E?
Group E comprises of Spain, Sweden, Poland, and Slovakia.
Okay. I'm eating the
Now
chocolate.
you're eating chocolate.
Haha, fantastic. How many games have we had of Group E so far?
They've all played once.
Mm-hmm.
Spain's played Sweden and Poland played Slovakia.
Okay. So with my very limited knowledge of pretty much everything, but especially football, Spain are a super team. They're one of the footballing nations, right? Sweden are pretty good. Poland are but they've got the best striker in Europe. Slovakia, who even knows, man? Slovakia could be like one of the worst footballing teams in Europe, or they might be like Croatia, where they're somehow one of the best teams, and I've got no idea about it at all.
One of those former Eastern Bloc.
Yeah, who are somehow amazing with football. So if I was going to layer this team, I think Spain should be the best team. Then probably Sweden, then Poland, then Slovakia. What do you reckon?
I mean, that's not a bad shout. If anything...
A bit of a battle between Poland and Sweden, perhaps.
If anything, a little... Well, that might actually end up being closer to the truth, but if anything, it might be a little out of date. And
like this chocolate orange, actually.
And if anything, it's Spain really who have changed a lot in the kind of the public consciousness, having been dominant in world football from 2008 through to 2012, winning 2 Euros and the World Cup in a short space of time. But the problem was that was very much their golden generation, and all those players are gone. I think the only players that are still in the squad from that time are Sergio Busquets, their captain, and Jordi Alba, their vice-captain.
And we all know what happened to Sergio Busquets.
And we all know what happened to Sergio Busquets. He missed the first game with COVID. I don't know if he's going to be allowed to play the next game or not. But David De Gea, I think, and Cesar Azpilicueta probably in squads around that time, but they were second fiddle behind the people in front of them. So really, this is nothing like the Spain team of old. And even like having watched them against Sweden, even to watch them, you wouldn't really recognise them. Under Vicente Del Bosque, they brought this tiki-taka kind of football to the public consciousness and made it their own and dominated the world with it. That group of players were almost unbeatable. But even the style of football seems to have changed based on what I saw against Sweden and based on some of their results leading into this tournament. I don't really think that tiki-taka thing is their style anymore. And whatever you might want to call their style now, it didn't work against Sweden. Sweden just bolstered down, stayed organised, really frustrated Spain, who didn't lack chances, but they just kept fluffing them. They just seemed underprepared.
Steve used the phrase toothless.
toothless is very true, especially when their main striker is one of, I think, the most overrated players in Europe, which is Alvaro Morata. I don't dig him at all. I think when he was younger at Atletico, he had the potential to be the next big Spanish star. Maybe he actually suffered from being so far behind in that pecking order with the national team. So he's meant to be inheriting the mantle of David Villa and Fernando Torres. But his failed spell at Chelsea maybe was a pretty good precursor to how he's been with the national team, at least in this first game. His goal scoring record is not bad. It's 19 goals in 41 games. It's nearly a goal every other game. But yeah, I've never trusted him to be like a proper world class player. But I mean, their run-in would probably have given into this tournament have given people, I guess, a little bit of a glimmer that there will still be this powerhouse. They have, since the Nations League games back in September, they've only lost once, including all the Nations League games, all their friendlies, and all of their World Cup qualifying games. They've only lost once, and that was away to Ukraine, 1-0. So that seems good. But and actually, they also included a 6-0 win against Germany.
That's kind of mind-blowing, because in the match against Sweden, I couldn't really see them getting a goal. No. Let alone how this team creates 6. Well, I don't know how they do it.
What comes to mind, a couple of instances in that game where, if it wasn't Alvaro Morata that was going in,
right? Okay,
he was through on goal at one moment, and we saw him take the shot where he set it wide to bend into the corner, and yeah,
if it had been a pre-injury Fernando Torres,
if it had been I don't know, if it had been like anyone else in the squad, maybe they would have tucked it away. Something about his confidence, it seems he can't really hit the target. And their starting 11 didn't really look like the type that would be scoring goals. Their front three was Morata, Ferran Torres of Manchester City, who's sort of really come into his own, I think, in the last half of the season and looked to be a threat for goals. On one side, and the other side was Dani Olmo, who I'd never even heard of before this tournament. Don't even know who he plays for. He plays for RB Leipzig.
Ah, of course.
And that was only his 12th cap. So and there were players in their squad which I would have thought would be a shoo-in. Gerard Moreno for Villarreal obviously had a great season. They won the Europa League, and I was surprised that he didn't get a start. There are other players who came on off the bench actually that seemed to make a good impact. Oyarzábal, which I'm probably pronouncing his name terribly, I'm sorry, from Real Sociedad. He looked quite interesting and dangerous when he came on. Thiago from Liverpool didn't start. He came off the bench. Rodri, the Man City player, who I've really rated in the Premier League, he didn't seem to be doing much. Koke, the Atletico Madrid captain, he did play, but he's never scored for his country in 51 caps.
Right.
And he didn't seem to be adding to it. So there was that game had this kind of melding of a toothless, to quote Steve, quite accurately, a toothless Spain versus a very resilient Swedish team who haven't lost a game this calendar year.
Wow.
They lost their last international of 2020 against France 4-2, but since then not lost a match. And none of these were against like great teams. They seem to have done what's the opposite of a lot of teams do, where in the build-up to a tournament, you'll have a friendly against maybe an easy team, and then maybe you'll have a friendly against a tougher team to kind of get you in the mould for the tournament. But they seem to have their friendlies were against Estonia, Finland, and Armenia.
Okay.
All at home. Then they won all of them quite easily. And a couple of World Cup qualifying games in March, they won against Georgia and Kosovo. So they haven't really had much of a fierce test since November against France, which they did lose. But they seem to know exactly what they were doing. I don't know if you remember back in the World Cup, there was a particular Swedish player that I picked out, and I said, the fact that he's been selected for the squad means they must be slim on pickings. Because while he was experienced, he was towards the end of his career, and I was even more surprised when they ended up playing him for all of their group games in the World Cup. And that was Sebastian Larsson, who is here again and was their captain against Spain. He's 36 years old, and he seems to go on forever. I think he played the whole 90 minutes, and he never seemed to tire. really impressive, and he was a great example to his team. And just for his work rate, and that's exactly how Sweden frustrated Spain. Do you remember probably their most exciting player is Alexander Isak, their striker, who was jinking and janking. He had great feet. He set up his strike partner Marcus Berg, and who missed an open goal. So it seemed like maybe both teams were lacking a bit of toothfulness.
Yeah.
But yeah, he seemed to be a real bright spark, and apparently, as always happens, if a young player has one good game at a major tournament, the papers are all like, the Premier League wants him, and all the Liverpool are now linked with him and stuff. But he was actually really impressive, the Sociedad player. But they didn't create an awful lot besides that. They seemed to set out to just stop Spain doing anything, and a combination of Spain not being able to put much together and then squandering the chances that they made turned it into a really great result for Sweden.
Yeah. In previous episodes, we've spoken about how each team seems to have a Gaza, where each team has a player with dyed blonde hair, and then each team has their own Modric, where they have the guy with the Alice band and the very specific look. Do you think there's another trend we're seeing in modern football now, especially international football, of the wily veteran that pulls their team through? Because that's what Modric is doing for Croatia. It's what Ronaldo is doing for Portugal. It's what we see here again for Sweden.
You got Goran Pandev, North Macedonia.
Absolutely.
Artem Zuba, Russia. There's another one. There's more. There's got to be more.
Yeah, even looking towards Belgium, where Eden Hazard now seems to be out of favour.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's just an age thing or a quality of his play thing, but
he's not. He's definitely not old enough to be considered a wily veteran. He should be in the prime. He should be, Ronaldo 8-9 years ago. Like he should be in the prime of his career. But Turkey is another one.
Yeah.
Burak Yilmaz, who was kind of been in the dark for most of his career and has had this weird, what they call like a swan song in his 30s, where now he's the most important player and their captain and makes things happen for them. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and it used to be the thing that we were saying about Italy is that in this tournament Italy don't have that. Right, in the previous tournaments, Italy, when they were successful, they had Pirlo or even Buffon before that, dragging this team through, inspiring them, marshalling them. And in this tournament, they don't have that. And they're doing great.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, actually, I think they do. They've got
really?
Giorgino Chiellini.
Okay.
But I think the difference is that he's a defender.
Yeah.
So
right.
While he is the wily veteran that the whole team will rally around and he's really important just for the squad, the fact that, again, he's like 36 or 37 and him and Bonucci are still their first choice defenders shows that whole generation of players who would be coming to the end of their careers when they hit 33... Maybe that's a thing of the past. Sports science and health's probably gotten better. So Ronaldo and Ibrahimovic, who ruled himself out of this tournament, like he's 39, but he's probably still going to keep playing in high level football.
Yeah, and with the Belgian team, is their entire defence.
Yeah, and that's what we saw against Denmark. Is that anything that threatens their pace is a real problem for them. And they brought in they got Alderweireld and Vertonghen, who are. Alderweireld shouldn't really be considered that old. I think he's like 32 or something, so he's good. But Vertonghen is a bit older, and Vermaelen is their other player on the bench who is 35. And then they brought in Denayer in the middle, who was the one who gave away the ball for the Denmark goal and looked shaky all game, which made me think if you've got two reliable centre halves who maybe are a bit slow, and you need to fill in the gap with a third one, maybe change the system because clearly that the balance didn't work. But yeah. That's definitely their weakness.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how that is now. To see that in a case of a Spain, what we're not seeing is that Mbappe shining star of the future coming through. Right, where we're saying, actually, the golden generation is gone. And what you want when the golden generation is gone is for there to be a player for Spain or for Sweden, or in the case of Poland, a Lewandowski, who can come in and just be the absolute figurehead that the squad needs. right? Where Lewandowski, like, he is the Poland squad. And we know he's the Poland squad because the television commentators wouldn't stop licking his asshole the whole time through. And to the point where I was getting very frustrated with it.
Yeah. And not only is that frustrating because it's like they're trying to set a precursor for when he finally does something.
Yes.
So they can be like, we were talking about it all this time and we said when he gets a sniff, he'd do something, and he did.
Yeah.
And then he didn't.
He didn't.
Slovakia, he barely touched the ball. I don't think he had a chance on a shot on goal. And there is a real... I think we've talked about before, like, he's one of these wily veterans pulling his team through, but he also happens to be one of the best players in the world. But the gulf between him and his teammates is vast, to the point where he's useless because he can't get any service. He's used to being serviced by his Bayern Munich teammates, some of the best midfield players, attacking players in the world. But Poland just don't have that. So he is just wandering around up there. I don't know how vocal he is as a leader, but
he didn't seem to be doing the Harry Kane thing and dropping back to get position. He was just like waiting.
That's not his game. That's not his game at all. But I don't know. I'd love to see how his goal scoring for his country has fluctuated, because he scored 66 goals in 120 caps, better than one every other game, which is amazing for international football. But he used to have players like Jakub Blaszczykowski who would supply him, and now, what's his name, Arkadiusz Milik, the Marseille player. He's injured for this, and he's another very important attacking player. So without those people around him who are of a decent enough quality to supply him, he's just wandering around, and he won't come and drop deep because he's more of a poaching kind of player. But if the ball is never there for him to snatch up, then he's just going to be taking up space and maybe distracting the defenders at best, giving them something to think about, going, we cannot switch off for a second because they've got Lewandowski.
And that was when the Poland goal did come in, actually, was when the Polish did score in that game against Slovakia. The most important movement in that penalty box was Lewandowski ran off to the left and the defenders followed him, leaving an open space for the strike that led to the goal.
Yeah, maybe that is the best thing that he can do, is to make pockets for the midfield players like Linetti, who scored, just to get in there and snatch things up.
Yeah. And I was really kind of surprised that the commentary team didn't pounce on that. To be like, Lewandowski, the best player in Europe. You see the way he deliberately dragged the defenders away to open the space. Magnificent play there by Lewandowski. Oh, and the guy who scored, that was a good shot. That was a good shot too.
Yeah.
But that's basically what the commentary team was like for the entire Poland game. It was very frustrating. It's
frustrating, and it's not really very fair on Slovakia either, because
they played good.
They were brilliant.
Yeah.
And they have the Slovakian Gaza.
Yes, yeah.
Andre Duda, who was really impressive.
He was.
And not only is he the Slovakian Gaza, he's kind of the Slovakian Phil Foden. Like, he's a very similar kind of player, moves around a lot, makes things happen, great feet, great vision. But yeah, they played absolutely brilliantly, and it was worthy that they won in the end. And I think I said at the beginning that Poland may be a dark horse, because I thought maybe the Lewandowski factor would play in, but now I've seen them play and looked at them in more detail. I think they may be propping up this group by the end of the group stage.
So I thought that this group was going to be a really interesting competitive group, where you've got Spain, who are not quite at their best, but they're still Spain. And Sweden, who are consistently a team that pushes and challenges. Then, you've got Poland, who have been again, another really decent team that is kind of, what would you say, like top 20? Like,
I think they're ranked to like 21st actually. So
okay, yeah. And then like Slovakia, you've got them like trying to jump ahead and really really show what they can do and make a name for themselves, and that was going to be really fun and competitive. And what you've had is Spain and Sweden being kind of remarkably boring. I thought that match, Poland just disappointing, and then Slovakia being the team you're like, oh yeah, Slovakia. All right.
Yeah, they're in that kind of Denmark, Finland area where you're like, wow, they've come, and North Macedonia, they've come here to have a go and do it properly. And it's weird with Poland actually, because they're one of these teams that, like, in qualification, or if you get drawn against them in your group, everyone goes, you've got to be careful about you've got to be careful with Poland, because you never really know. But the thing is, like, actually at major tournaments, they never really perform. Like they didn't get out the group at the last World Cup in 2018, and then they weren't even at any of the World Cups before that since 2002 and 2006, where again didn't get out the group. And then when it comes to the Euros, this is their fourth Euros ever.
Okay.
Whereas 2008 and 12 they didn't get out the groups.
And they were hosting one of those, weren't they?
Yes, the 2012 they hosted it and they got through, didn't get out the groups. And then in France in 2016 they got all the way to the quarterfinals, which was really impressive. But then that kind of is the only impressive thing they've done it in tournaments. So that I don't, now that I'm again looking into it, I'm not sure where the threat ever came from, except for when Lewandowski had good support and good players around him, and they could be a threat. But with him on his own, they're a shade of what they could be.
This is a really good chance for us to set Poland up to win the whole tournament now.
Well, that's what it takes for me to say. If I say they're going to do well, they're probably going to do badly, and if I say they're going to do badly, they're probably going to do quite well.
Yeah. Yeah, Poland is one of those interesting countries. I'm going to use this as my segue to go across. You remember when we were talking about Italy? We were saying for Italy how they were kind of faced with this choice in their democracy of Italy can either be a country more like Spain that embraces European values, in air quotes, those liberal ideas of equality and racial equality and LGBT equality, or they could be a country like Poland, who doesn't do that. And that was something we were looking at players earlier on, one of the Polish players, and you were like, oh, why is he not at the tournament?
That's Jakub Blaszczykowski, yeah.
Yes, yeah. You were just saying, oh, when he was there, he was able to provide something to Lewandowski that he's not going. And you were looking into his story, and he kind of had a tragic upbringing. But you said, oh, it says here he's a devout Roman Catholic, and he reads the Bible every day. And it's like, that is one of these big conflicts within Poland and Eastern Europe, and with the EU, with those countries that are becoming increasingly non-religious, I guess you could say, and becoming more secular. Well, we have, like in the UK, we see that religion is playing a smaller and smaller role, and in countries like Ireland, a famously Catholic country, where the old traditional ideas of religion are slowly being combated in terms of like abortion law and recognition of LGBT people and things like that. Poland is one of those countries that is very much not going in that direction in terms of its government. And one of the conflicts within the country itself is a really big divide, much bigger than we see over here, between those liberal in air quotes, those liberal ideas of what Europe should be like, with equality for all, and then those traditional concepts of what Poland has been for many, many years. And last year, during the pandemic, there were some of the biggest protests in Poland's history as a democratic country, where it was again down to abortion law and the treatment of LGBT people, where people went out into the streets and said, no, this is not for us. Because Poland is a country, again, we've spoken about coalitions and how in countries like Italy, they're not ruled by one political party, but coalitions of different political parties. Poland is another one of those countries where the coalition at the moment is the right-wing parties are in charge. And these are often the traditional ones, the Catholic ones. Poland is a country, in a similar way to Russia, where the Russian state is built on a cultural agreement between the government and the church. Poland operates in a very similar way, where the church is seen as an integral part of culture. And, this football player reads the Bible every day before bed, it said, you were saying earlier on. So we end up in this country whereby the right-wing parties kind of control everything, and there is an upcoming an upcoming election at the mayoral level for, I think this, I can't remember the name of the city. It's on the border with possibly Hungary? I can't remember the name of the city. But there's an upcoming election where it seems like the left-wing party might actually be able to push through and win the mayor, win the election of to become the mayor of the city. And it seems like this kind of reckoning moment in Polish politics, where it's like, if the left can start to make gains here, then this more progressive idea of Poland will be able to spread. But much like what we said with Russia, where it's the people in the cities that have these ideas, these urban dwelling people who have these European ideas, and it's the people who live in rural Poland who have those traditional ideas. And we said that for Russia, we say it in America, we say it in the UK. This massive divide between the people who live in cities and the people who don't is going to end up being one of the defining political identities of our generation. Is the people who live in cities say LGBT rights, and the people who live in farms and don't see a lot of LGBT people are like, but in Poland they're LGBT free zones where gay people, lesbians, transsexual people are not allowed to go. We are proud, they say, to be an LGBT free zone. And you can't imagine that in the UK. You can't imagine that in France. And this is what we have, the Council of Europe, which is one of the big human rights bodies within Europe. The Council of Europe calling on Poland to deliberately reverse what they're doing. Because it's causing, when the European was set up, it was an economic agreement. And now you end up with such a clash of ideology whereby we have a free movement of people in Europe, right? We don't anymore, thanks to Brexit. But French people can move to Germany, and German people can move to Spain, and Spanish people can move to Poland. But if you're a Spanish gay person and you move to a specific place in Poland, you're not welcome there because of your sexual orientation. And that is a potentially huge schism between what in Eastern Europe they would call Western ideas, and just more traditional values. And there have been big protests across other bits of Europe against Poland and Hungary as well, which we'll come back to Hungary when we talk about Group F. But Poland and Hungary as these countries that are politically moving away from the rest of Europe. But they're part of this wave of right-wing politics that we see around the world. It's no different to Trump in America. It's that same idea of traditional values, in air quotes, religious values, Catholic values if you're in Poland. And we can see it in the football team because the players read the Bible. They're no different. They're Polish people, and it always ends up leading me back to Brazil, where Ronaldinho was one of the people who was supporting Bolsonaro. Ronaldinho as a black Brazilian player, being like Bolsonaro, the right wing politician. He's what we're all for.
Well, he's not famous for making great decisions.
Well, Ronaldinho.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is he, or is he not still in prison? He was definitely been in prison in Paraguay, I think. Yeah, him and his brother were arrested going into Paraguay for trying to use a fake passport to get into the country so that they could attend an event and book a promotion. They ended up being held in prison until they eventually agreed a plea deal, which released them. I think it was they were in there at least a couple of months or something like that, and they were forced to pay fines of $90,000 and $110,000 respectively. And I don't know if his time in I don't know if his time in prison was super difficult, since he was took part in futsal tournaments and stuff. Probably, like when really famous people get sent to prison and they're actually not really treated like prisoners. They're treated like royalty. It seems like he's turned his life around since that spell. But great decisions he's not always made.
No. Well, I get it's just one of those things with we see across the world, and even moving into Sweden now. Sweden, a famously left-wing country, has been heralded for so many years as how socialism should work. Is like in Scandinavia, Sweden, everyone's happy in Sweden and stuff, so people say. Sweden at the moment is facing a political crisis. Actually, this is breaking news because it only started happening happening yesterday with a vote of no confidence against their prime minister, where the socialist government of Sweden is at threat. Again, in large part because of coronavirus, and if you're going to drag up your two probable reasons for your government to be in danger. Number one, coronavirus. Number two, immigration. Immigration is one of those topics you can never really get away from. And the right-wing party in Sweden, the Sweden Democrats, I'm sure they have a more exciting name in Swedish, they are making the argument that a recent spike in COVID cases in Sweden comes down to an open immigration policy, and Sweden is one of those countries that didn't really have a lockdown. They did a lot better than other European countries, but there have always been arguments that they could have done better if they had a lockdown, but they didn't. They went nowhere near the same way that we've done. But again, it's back down to that immigration question again, and there has been a rise in like gang crime and things in Sweden in recent years, and they're like, that's because we let in people who need somewhere to live. And if we keep letting in people in need, then they'll start doing crime. And I think there's probably a better argument to be made that immigration during a coronavirus pandemic prevents you from being able to integrate populations, because you can't go, hi, these are your neighbours. They're going to kill you if you cough at each other. It doesn't give you a chance to actually to integrate populations very easily. But even that same right wing thing is moving back through again straight into Spain. The right wing parties are going crazy over the Catalonia again. Catalonia's back, baby. But this time it's because the current left wing government of Spain has said, oh, we're just gonna kind of pardon the people who there was when we spoke about Catalonia in the World Cup. We were saying how they had this illegal referendum where they went, yeah, we're going to have a referendum for independence. And the Spanish government went, no, you're not. I said, yeah, we are. We're going to do it. And they did it. And then they all got arrested, the leaders of that. And now they're saying, the current Spanish government is saying, we're just going to pardon them and we're going to let it go. And there are mass protests in Madrid about this, saying you can't let them go. They're traitors. They're traitors to our country. They tried to divide the country, and you're just going to let them go. Again, it's this right-wing power that we see sweeping through. I don't know enough about Slovakia to bring it up, but I'm going to guess they've got problems too.
Well, they were not long ago. They were Czechoslovakia.
This is true.
So they've gone through a whole change.
Yes, yeah.
And this is only their second Euros since they broke away from Czechoslovakia. They didn't qualify for 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012. They got in Euro 2016 and they got to the round of 16. They got out of their group, but then got that far. So it's interesting to see how they get on only their second time. They've only been to one World Cup, which is in 2010. But again, they got out of their group in the round of 16. So they're a new team. Like they're basically a new country.
I think that's one of the interesting things about this tournament as well, is being able to go Finland. This is their first major tournament in years. Scotland, this is their first major tournament in years. Slovakia, they've only just recently started doing these tournaments. North Macedonia, Wales made a big splash at the last one, but they made a splash because this was one of their first tournaments in years. And it's really exciting to see that. And it's a shame that it comes, at the cost of former winners like Greece, who didn't even won it. They didn't even win it that long ago. They beat Cristiano Ronaldo to win the tournament, and now they're not even here. But it's really interesting to see this like a new wave of countries kind of coming through. And I think it'll give a lot of hope to countries like Scotland and hopefully even somewhere like Northern Ireland and like the Republic of Ireland, who had great moments in the past and haven't got there.
Yeah, well, I was going to say countries like Kosovo as well.
Yeah,
they're so new and so newly affiliated with UEFA, and maybe it won't be long before we see them at a major tournament.
Yeah. I think, again, this is going to be one of those things that if we continue to do this podcast in the future, we might end up talking about a newly independent Scotland. At a future tournament, whether maybe not a World Cup, but maybe at the next Euros, then we might be talking about what happens if an independent Catalonia goes through. It has Barcelona, Dave. It has Barcelona, the Barcelona.
Maybe Pep Guardiola will leave Man City to manage the Catalonian national team.
How many of the Spanish national team would end up being Catalonian players instead? And you end up, and especially those players for Barcelona who would have lived in Catalonia for years,
maybe they'll be faced with a choice.
Yeah.
Like, if they qualify for Catalonian citizenship, do they play for them or do they play for homeland Spain?
Yeah. And it's gonna be really a really interesting turn of events for Europe, and it's again that thing with that exact divide in Poland where we have half a people moving one way and half a people moving another. That same thing with America, where you have a country that doesn't recognize itself anymore because the populace are moving away from each other, increasingly so, and at an increasing pace. And it's divisive, but in many cases countries have to go through this to move forward. And it's the end of an era, I think, around the world that we're seeing, of the democratic experiment of the 20th century. And
that sounds like a title of a book.
Yeah, well,
the democratic experiment of the 21st century, 20th or 21st?
Well, both. Yeah.
By Dominic Archer.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things in Poland as well about this election for mayor in the city, is that they're saying we are taking our democracy back. They're saying these governments have been undemocratic and we're taking it back. And this will allow us to segue into Orban in the next episode where we talk about Hungary, is that move towards authoritarianism threatens to end the democratic experiment by going back to what Europe faced 100 years ago, where, 100 years ago, there was a little putsch in Munich that saw, the rise of the Nazi Party, and, Mussolini was strong in Italy this time 100 years ago. We've seen what happens when populations become divided in the past. And one of the greatest tests that we're going to have now as Europeans is, can we hold this together or do we take a step backwards? And hopefully the countries that are divided at the moment can look like a country such as, I want to say like a country like Slovakia or like a North Macedonia or something, can find something here. We've seen before where countries find in their sports a national identity, and they find, and it sounds almost coy and stupid, but it's not, because that is what people need to identify with each other, is, something that is there that we can all be proud of and we can all identify with.
Well, in the World Cup, we talked to our Portuguese friend Luis.
Yeah.
And about
the current manager of the Spanish team.
No, see, the Spanish manager is called Luis Enrique,
right?
And our friend is called Luis Enrique.
Oh, okay.
One
Sorry.
is Spanish, one is Portuguese.
Yes,
easily.
Our friend Luis has an H and an S on his surname. That's the only difference.
The only difference.
Yeah.
But no, he talked about with the Portugal winning the Euros in 2016, how it did give the country something to kind of rally behind, and their country was moving in an opposite direction to what you're talking about with a lot of Europe, where they were getting more left-wing and more progressive, and that things were positive, and almost parallel to that, they were winning the Euros, and they won the Eurovision Song Contest, and things were going great. So I think football on a global scale can rally a country when it needs it to.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping, because next time we're going to talk about Hungary. And Hungary is one of those countries that I'm kind of dreading the episode on. Because it's going to be a lot of, this is horrible.
But at least we've got Ronaldo. We've got France, the world champions. And we've got Germany.
We've got a shit Germany.
We've got a shit Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, with not even Thomas Muller can bring them together so far. So, yeah, hopefully there'll be a good balance of fun football talk and
I think there will.
Dour global politics talk.
Yeah, I think there will, because we were gobsmacked in that France-Germany match. And yeah, it's going to be great to be able to get into that and kind of pose the question, what the hell happened to Germany? So...
I think we asked that question at the World Cup as well, didn't we?
Yeah, continue the question.
Yeah.
The continuing question, what the hell happened to Germany? Join us for the next episode, the final group episode of Who Watches the World Cup. What did Gary Lineker call it?
The Group of F.
The Group of F. Some copywriter at the BBC gave himself a pat on the back for that one.
I'm sure he got like a bonus latte or something.
Yeah. Good job.
Good job, my friend.
Good job, 22-year-old.
Yeah, unpaid intern.
Yeah.
Here's a latte. But Dom.
Oh.
I know you normally sign us off, but I just wanted to say that Sweden versus Slovakia, the next Group E game, starts in 25 minutes.
Oh!
So...
How did I not know this?
I'm going to do it. So, what do you think is going to happen in this one, Dom?
Great question, Dave. I have to say, in my vast footballing experience that I'm constantly boasting about on this podcast, Sweden played a good defensive game against Spain, but they'd be looking to step it up a notch against Slovakia. The question is, can they do so? We've seen that Slovakia can stop those greater, more threatening teams in the form of Poland and come back to counter them with a victory. I don't think Sweden has what it takes to overwhelm the Slovakian defence in the way that they'd be hoping to do so. They're going to have swapped to a more positive style of football, thinking that they can take Slovakia in a way that they couldn't take Spain. But Slovakia have got a few tricks up their sleeve. I'm putting it on Slovakia.
That was brilliant.
Man. Do you think I could do this pundit shit?
I think you could do the whole thing up by yourself.
Thank you very much. What about you? What's your call?
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think Sweden definitely can be disciplined and defensive against teams that they're afraid of, but they will want to step up and try and take the game to Slovakia. But they might leave themselves open to being counter-attacked. And Slovakia, I'm excited to see what they do I think actually Slovakia's game plan will probably be similar to the one it was against Poland. Poland, Sweden, probably similar as far as they're concerned. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, the other big one, of course, later on today. I don't know if you've heard.
Croatia, Czech Republic?
No, you witty bastard. No, of course. The most hyped game in British media of all time. England v Scotland. The game that English people were like, oh, this should be fun. And Scottish people were like,
fucking get them!
Yes. Yeah, that we have become more excited about because the Scottish are so excited about it. Whereas, I was saying this to you yesterday. Before, I was like, England, Scotland, yeah, that would be a fun rivalry, but, I'm not, it's not like England, Germany, but I want England to murder them, right? Like, I want England to put up to do well, and I want Scotland to do well as well. But then, after watching the Scottish commentary about it, I'm like, oh, this is on. All right, if you want it, then bring it, right? I bring you fucking bring it, Scotland. What do you reckon's going to happen with that one?
It should be England are the better team and they should win comfortably. And I know a lot of what we were reading earlier was like 2-0, 3-0. It'll be easy, but these kind of rivalries, especially when one side of them is much more fierce than the other, they could throw anything into the mix. So I would love it to be the game of the tournament, or like Holland, Ukraine kind of levels of excitement as long as England win.
Yes, this is what we were saying, because both of us want Scotland to do well. We're kind of lucky that England have already got the win in Croatia in the bag, right? And Scotland lost their previous game. So I would really like a 3-3 draw, where it's just a great game of football. Scotland put up like a solid game. Everyone gets the point, and then Scotland demolish worn down Croatia, and England beat the Czech Republic, and we both go through. That's my dream scenario.
Actually, I changed my mind. I want that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Who Watches the World Cup. By the next episode, you'll know how absolutely wrong we were about everything. But I'm looking forward to these games today. Let's go get some snacks. Let's go watch some football.